I call Dr. Deborah Russell.
Mr. Speaker, this bill is small fry in terms of what it does and in terms of what it concerns itself with. It is actually only tidying up some small matters in the Conservation Act. You know, the scales have fallen from our eyes in terms of what might actually be in this in the Conservation Act. We've seen the holes in the net of protections around our freshwater fish.
Thesaurus out this one.
And come across problems such as the native fish in national parks and in scenic reserves were protected, but native fish on conservation parks were not. It was a slippery set of rules that people found it hard to understand. So this bill is a bit of a grab bag of measures. It is not a dredge scooping up everything on the ocean floor. In fact, it's a set of tools, you know, a set of flies, of hooks, of rods, of sinkers, each targeted at a specific purpose to try to catch exactly the right problem, to snag the particular problem, to untie the knot, to sort it out. This is what this bill aims to do. And in fact, for all the cries from the opposition side of the House that there was no detail in this bill, I tell you, Mr. Speaker, that in fact there is a lot of detail in this bill. And it tries to sort out from very specific problems. If we look at Clause 5 of the bill, something that makes very clear is that sports fishing will be permitted, but not at the expense of freshwater fish. So in other words, there's a balancing of provisions there. And if we carry on to Clause 7 of the bill, Clause 5, it amends a particular definition. It really does. It inserts a provision saying that where there is a provision in a freshwater fisheries management plan and a provision in a sports fish and game management plan, then the provision in the freshwater fish management plan prevails. It's a really straightforward ordering rule there. If we go to Clause 7, it inserts a new section 26 ZHA in the Act. And what it is doing is making it very, very clear that a person can take Indigenous fish from a fishery if it is taken primarily for food consumption, including for sale of food. And it can be taken, the fish are taken in a manner that does not lead to their injury or death. So it does allow for sports fishing, and provide that those fish are returned to the waters as soon as practicable after being taken. That sort of detail is present in this Act. If we want to have a look at some of the real detail that's in here, if we go to Clause 13 of the bill, it inserts an entire new clause. It replaces the clause about closed seasons. And instead of having a closed season that may be imposed for any length of time, Mr. Speaker, it limits those closed seasons to 5 years. That's the kind of detail that has been put into this Act by the very careful and conscientious Minister for Conservation. So I say to you, Mr. Speaker, that the Minister has been very, very careful with this particular Act, trying to catch exactly the right clause, the right rules, trying to catch exactly the right regulations to make it clear what this Act applies to, what this bill would apply to. So, for all the cries from the other side of the House, I think this is a very careful bill. There has been one objection raised, in particular for the Fish and Game Councils, and I think this is quite an important objection, talking about how Fish and Game has perhaps been excluded from this bill. But if we look at what Fish and Game's objectives are, their objectives are to manage, maintain and enhance sports fish and game birds. In other words, it's an objective that conflicts with the objectives of protecting our Indigenous fish. That's something we need to think about long and hard, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, as a final word, may I pay a compliment to my former colleague at Massey University, now at Victoria University, Dr. Mike Joy, whose work on fisheries has been so important.
But this debate is interrupted and is set down for resumption next sitting day. The House stands adjourned until 2 p.m. tomorrow. Pō Mārie.